All right, everyone, thanks for coming. So we're just going to get started, and I'm going to introduce Angie. She and I had the pleasure of meeting when she was working with Schools Cubed as a consultant, and it was so much fun to meet her and work with her. So Angie is a dedicated and passionate leader for change in schools and classrooms. She has over 20 years experience in education, where she has served in the roles of classroom teacher, curriculum coordinator, instructional coach, professional development coordinator, where she worked to train and coach teachers on effective instructional practices and strategies, as the building principal at Matthews Elementary in New Madrid County School District. She has received numerous awards for her performance in the classroom and has found a new passion for working with building leaders to promote systems to improve literacy for all students. Angie received the 2019-2020 Outstanding Rural Administrator Award from MARE, which stands for Missouri Association of Rural Educators. She is now on a journey of literacy improvement, systems and structure work, and school district transformation with the amazing staff, students, community members at the School District of Thorp. And they are just so lucky, Angie, to have you.
Well, thank you.
Welcome
Thank you
to
for saying
Wisconsin.
that. Thank you. I'm loving Wisconsin so far, so thank you. And thank you, Donna, for the invitation to speak to everyone today. Before I start with my presentation, I just kind of want to throw out that I'm not a researcher, an author, an expert. I'm simply a practitioner. And honestly, I'm the product of really high quality coaching and professional development. And I'm just a practitioner that uses the research, the science of reading research, the research-based instructional strategies, and I put those into practice in everything I do in the hope of always impacting all students and empowering teachers. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that?
Nope.
Donna, what do I need to do then to?
Well, let's see. You have the rights, right? So you just go to share screen and then you go, oh, it's coming up. It may have just have been delayed. Okay, so we don't, okay.
Can you see it now?
Yes, now just put it in presentation mode and you should be good.
Okay, are we good?
We're seeing the next slide, so.
Yep, let me change that. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, all right. So my presentation today is called Beyond the Science of Reason. Beyond the Science of Reading. I'm going to just talk for a little bit about what literacy leaders need to understand to be change agents. I think it's important to point out that anybody can be a change agent and a leader for change, whether you're a building leader, a district leader, an instructional coach, classroom teacher, or interventionist. Anyone who's implementing the science of reading, we can all make a powerful difference.
Well, is it
Wait, excuse me. Everyone, please put on yourself on mute.
15.
Yeah, if you want to borrow it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. But we can all make a powerful difference in schools and in the lives of our students. So my first question is, what is it that we need to understand to be literacy change agents? And we have to understand that our work goes beyond the science of reading. The science of reading is critically important. We can't do our work without it, and we have to know this information to reach all students. That's key. But we can't stop there. So what else needs to be done? I'm going to be talking about two things in particular, the what and the how. So the what that we need to know is the science of reading. Teachers have to understand the science of reading so that they know what their students need to know and what it is that they need to learn. The Reading League's done a great job of giving us the definition of the science of reading, and we know that it is the findings of over 40 years of research that teaches us how the brain learns to read and write and why it is that some students have difficulty learning that. These findings also, though, give us guidance on how to teach reading so that more students, so that we can get that 95 or more students can read proficiently. As leaders, though, we have to provide the science of reading training and this information to our teachers. And if we don't, I feel it's our responsibility. And if we don't, I feel that we are failing them. We have to embrace the science, put it into practice, because when we do, if we do it, when we do it, we just get better outcomes. And it really is that simple. So if you're a leader and your teachers have not had that training yet, or if they don't have a deeply built base knowledge of the science of reading, then that is our starting point. In his book, Language at the Speed of Light, you may have heard this before, but I love it. Dr. Mark Seidenberg writes, how do children learn to read? The answer is the same for all children. What they learn, what they need to learn does not change. I remember being an instructional coach and an elementary principal in my first few months on those jobs, and I remember having an aha moment. And my aha moment was this. I realized that we had teachers, especially in the lower grades, teaching children reading, teaching children to learn to read, that did not understand how children learn to read. And that's a serious problem. They were really kind of teaching the subject of reading, but did not understand the foundation and the science of reading, how it is that children learn to read. As leaders, we have to ensure that all teachers get that information. I remember when I first heard about the science of reading, the simple view of reading, Scarborough's rope, the Big Five, I heard that information from Dr. Vicki Gibson. And that presentation, when I look back in my career, completely changed my career, and it forever changed the lives of my students. It empowered me to go into the classroom, and it gave me the knowledge base to then empower my students. So the science of reading is really our starting point. It's the starting point, but it's not the finish line. So the other thing is the how. Teachers have to know how to do this. That's what they're really wanting to know from us as leaders. How do they share the science of reading with their students? What does that look like? What does that sound like in their classrooms? Now that they have that knowledge, what do they do with it? How does it change what the instruction that they're providing in their classrooms? I love the information in the book Speech to Print. That's a great one. If you haven't read it, it's by Dr. Louisa Moats. And in her book, she writes that teachers who are most effective teaching students that are struggling readers have both content knowledge and also practical skill, and are more inclined to use direct, systematic, explicit, structured language methods for those who do not learn easily. So our instruction, when we provide the how, it has to be explicit, it has to be direct, systematic, explicit, and structured. More about the how. I also strongly believe that we have to train teachers on research-based instructional practices. What is it that is proven to work? I say that because we don't have any time to waste. As teachers and educators, it's like time is our enemy. We never have enough of it. Our students don't have time to waste, and our teachers don't either. So we have to spend our time doing what works, what is proven to work, and get rid of the practices that we know are found to be ineffective. To do this work, I have always used the instructional practices from John Hattie's book, Visible Learning for Teachers. That book explains how to make learning visible, and it gives us the effect sizes of instructional practices. It's listed at the back of the book if you're not familiar, and it really rates each strategy and gives you the rate of effectiveness. 0.4 is considered a typical average year of growth by a typical average student in a regular classroom, but it gives us the strategies where we can get 2 or more years growth out of our students. and it shows us the impact that our instruction can have. I also believe that to do this work, we've got to look at explicit instruction. And the resource that I have used in my career and what I've coached teachers on and led teachers is by using the book Explicit Instruction by Anita Archer and John Hughes. I've literally based my classroom experience and my work on that book. That book explains that there are two components of explicit instruction: the design and the delivery. I, for a long time as a teacher, really just focused on the delivery. Was I delivering an explicit instruction? Was I engaging students? Was I doing all the key components of good instruction? But that book really drills down and talks about it's twofold. It's a twofold approach. So we have the design of the lesson or the planning process. And we know that the more time we spend on planning that lesson, then the easier the delivery is. The second component is the delivery of the lesson, how we provide the instruction to our students. And Anita Archer uses, I'm sure you've heard this, I do, we do, you do. She also tells us, though, and explains what the essential components of a good lesson are. It begins with a clear learner objective that's based on a state standard. As we are teaching, we refer back to that standard so that we make it explicitly clear to our students. We also provide the relevance of the standard. Why is that important? That lesson objective that we've chosen for that lesson. Why is that important? Why is it that our students need to know it? Is it something they need to know for the next chapter? Can they not do the next concept without knowing that? Is it a foundational skill? Is it going to be on the end of year assessment or the unit assessment? So what is the relevance? Why is it important that the students need to know it? There's modeling, guided practice, independent practice. And then we have to think about how will we assess the learning? How will we know if the students have learned it? What will be our success criteria? What will be the information that if we have that, we know they have learned what we were trying to teach them? So how will we know if students have not only learned it, but how have they mastered it? Have they mastered it? Are they proficient at it? Or are they just barely beginning to get a knowledge base of it? And then what will we do if the students have not learned that information? As a leader, I have learned to place the focus on the learning and not the teaching. That doesn't always sound like that makes sense because we think we're teachers and we need to be focused on the teaching. But we really have to put in the forefront in our minds all the time the learning. Are the students learning it? Did the students learn what we wanted them to learn? And if not, what are we going to do about that? And did the students learn or master what it was that we were providing instruction on? Not did we teach it, but did we learn it? Because we can have a beautiful lesson plan and we could have had engaging instruction and really nice delivery, but at the end of that lesson, our students still might not have learned it. So it's not how well we taught it, but did they learn it? Invisible learning for teachers, John Hattie writes about the need to retain learning at the forefront and to consider teaching primarily in terms of its impact on student learning. In that book, he writes about, he uses the phrase, know thy impact. Did our instruction have an impact on the lives of our instruction? Is it having an impact? And how do we know if they learned it? And there's really only one way to know if they learned it or if they not, and how well they know it. And that's where we come to our next big idea that as change agents, we have to focus on, and that is the data. Now, I don't have a long time in this meeting today, so I'm not going to be able to go through a very important part, and it's something that I've been trained and taught, and I've received professional development on, and that is for this approach, we also have to have, it's the systems and structures work, systems, structures, and the strategies of science of reading. I have been fortunate to work with a company called Schools Cubed that's owned by Patty Montgomery. I'm not going to be able to go deep into that today, but I am going to talk about how do we know if our learning has been had an impact on our students, and that is we have to use our data. I like to say we have to collect it and accept it. Collecting it is very easy, and accepting it is sometimes hard because it doesn't always feel good. We can go into a data meeting and not like the results that we've gotten. We can have taught and been providing instruction and go in for a middle of year benchmark meeting or a 6-week check-in meeting and not be thrilled with the results. We might have thought that we've had a stronger impact. So we have to collect it and accept it. And I feel like that is where a strong leader, whether it be a literacy like instructional coach leader, a building leader, even a teacher leader or district leader, I feel that that is where we really come into play. I have found that displaying the data is critically important because as a team, when we're working as a team, really trying to have an impact on our learners, when we are looking at that data, when it is displayed in the building, like if it's up in a data room, if it's on the walls, it kind of becomes a living, breathing thing that we can't escape. And it makes it very hard to ignore. It also really helps create a sense of urgency because we can see those numbers and talk about those numbers when we are collaborating as teams. And that's where I feel that leadership is important because we have to make those opportunities to discuss that data, review that data available to our teachers. So we have to be instructional leaders that are having instructional conversations with our teachers. We have to be talking to them about, okay, now that we've looked at this data, how's that going to change our instruction? Will our instruction change based upon these results? And if so, how? And I feel like that is where coaching and support really comes into play. Teachers need to leave a data meeting with an instructional plan. I remember so many times as a teacher going into a data meeting, looking over the data, reviewing it, maybe briefly discussing it. But I know now, I look back and what I know now, what I did not know then is we weren't going deep enough. We were just briefly discussing it, but we were not drilling down to that child by child, looking at every single student's specific data and looking at, have they mastered it? A lot of people have asked me, I recently did a podcast and they're like, what is it that you've looked at as being proficient and have they mastered it? I've been trained to look at, through our work with Schools Cubed, looking at the 50th percentile. A lot of assessment programs don't look at the 50th percentile, but that is kind of our bar, our standard that we look at is have the students reach the 50th percentile or higher. And if not, what are we going to do? And that is where teachers need to leave those data meetings with an instructional plan. And that is where then too, as leaders, we come into play. After they have that instructional plan that we've talked about at that data meeting, then there's a follow-up process to it. It is going into those classrooms, observing the instruction, giving teachers the feedback, then following up with them after providing the feedback. Were they able to implement it? Do they need someone to model? More coaching? Do they have questions? Answering their questions. And why is that so important? The Wallace Foundation, if you haven't read that and you're a leader, I can't recommend that enough. The Wallace Foundation released a report and they found that by replacing a below average principal with an above average one, we can increase a typical student's learning by nearly 3 months in both reading and math annually. So that is why I am saying and stressing that it's those instructional conversations that we have with our teachers that are so critically important. So how is it that we do collect the data and accept the data? In the work that I've done as a building leader and a district leader, this is the plan that we've used. And this is what Thorp was using before I got here. And this is what we've continued to use this year. There are 3 collection periods. There's the beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year benchmark assessment. Right after that, we have a data meeting to look at those benchmark results. We then use those results to set up small groups within the classroom, intervention groups that will be pulled out, like by an interventionist or a title teacher. And then we also set up the next set of assessment data that we'll collect, and that's our progress monitoring data. Following those benchmark data meetings, we also have 6-week check-in meetings to see if our students are making progress. And in those meetings, we look at, are they making progress? Are they not? And what are we going to do about it? We also have added weekly meetings to review our progress monitoring. I did that as an elementary principal, and I can tell you that is when the data just completely took off. It was on a trajectory of making progress, but when we really drilled down to look at the weekly progress monitoring data and came together as a team to look at who made progress, who didn't, and what are we going to do about it, that's when we saw an increase, a significant increase in our data. We added those meetings in second semester here in the School District of Thorp. And again, we saw an increase in student data. We've seen significant growth from our middle of year to our end of year data here. We saw students that were still like in tier 3 intensive move to strategic. And a lot of those students we saw in our data meetings that we had yesterday were up to green. They are at the 50th or above, 50th percentile or above. So when you have that weekly meeting, again, what you're going to discuss at that is you look at who made progress and why, because that's what we need our teachers to make the connection. What was it that they did in the classroom that changed their data? Was it repeated readings? Was it something that they said or did differently at small group instruction? Was it something that was done in pull-out intervention or in title that actually made the change to that student's data? The reason we have to drill down and get the why is because we then need to share that with the team so that we all can take that information and implement it. That's again, finding what works and just, we don't have to reinvent it each time. It's finding what works and doing more of that. So what was it that we did in the classroom? How did we get that result? Why did we get that result? And then looking at who did not make progress, and again, why? What was it? Here, it's been a lot of the times we have found the students simply did not get enough repetitions of it. They need more repetition. I recently said that about the number of repetitions in a podcast. So I'll throw that out again because I've gotten so many follow-up questions. The information I'm taking from the book, A Principal's Primer for Raising Reading Achievement. That book's written by Patty Montgomery, Melody Ilk, and Louisa Moats. And in there, they talk about the importance of the number of repetitions that we provide our students. So I'm going to reference off my board quickly. A gifted learner needs roughly 1 to 4 repetitions to learn a skill. A typical learner needs 4 to 14, basically repetitions. A struggling learner though, or a struggling reader, someone who just doesn't grab that, master that quickly, might need 14 to 40 repetitions of something. And then a disabled learner, a student that's special education student or has like a learning disability of any time, is going to require 40 to maybe up to 40 to 200 repetitions. So that's one of the things that often you'll discuss as a team, that maybe they just have not had enough repetitions to master that. So how is it that we can get in those repetitions? Can we call on those students more? Have them do more reading in whole group, drill down and spend more time with those students, increase the number of repetitions there in small group. I've worked with teachers as a building principal and actually had them go through and tally mark how many times will the students get that information at small group or in the whole group reading lesson. So what happens when we do that? What are some of the results? For some reason, the slide is not coming up, so I'm just going to go through that. We do see growth in our students. These things that I've mentioned, they are proven to work. We also get, though, improved professionalism, because once teachers make the connection of, oh my gosh, because I did this, the students' data went up, or the students are learning at a quicker pace or quicker rate, we empower the teachers. We do see improved professionalism. It actually changes the dialogue that the teachers start having with each other. We do get improved achievement. We also get improved instruction in our classrooms, because once the teachers get really good at using those research-based instructional practices, providing quality feedback to their students, using methods such as reciprocal teaching, explicit teaching, we just get better instruction for the students. And we get systematic instruction that is consistent throughout the classrooms in our building. Something that the teachers have worked so hard on here in Thorp is doing systematic, explicit vocabulary, and it is consistent no matter what classroom you walk in. In the elementary, you can go in a middle school science class. I've been in a high school ag class where the teacher was explicitly teaching vocabulary in the same system and format that's used consistently in our elementary and throughout the district in our classrooms. You do then begin to develop a common language throughout your building and throughout your district. And then what you end up doing, we begin to develop building leaders. We develop our teachers, and then we develop them to be building leaders. We also develop teacher leaders, and then we develop our administrators. We develop our building leaders, our admin. The Wallace Foundation, another thing that is stated in that report, is that it is difficult to envision an investment with a higher ceiling on its potential return than improving principal leadership. So it is true that we have to develop our teachers, but we also in turn have to develop our building leaders, because by empowering them, they can then go and empower their staff members, and the entire group of teachers. There's a phrase or quote that I love. I actually have it up on my inspiration board behind me, and it says, great leaders grow leaders. And I feel like that is so true. In closing, I just want to say our teachers need us, and our students are depending on us. This is something that we can do. The research is there. The proven techniques are there. It is our job simply to embrace them and implement them. This is doable. I don't know where you are on your journey, if you're just beginning, if you're down the road, if you've reached a point where it's maybe become stagnant. I just want to say to you that this is doable. We can be change agents and leaders for change in literacy in our schools. The time is now. There seems to be a great momentum behind the science of reading and really learning and getting having an impact on our learners in school. So this is something that we can do. This is something we can do in our schools, our states, and in our country. And I just want to empower you to go back, be an agent of leader and a leader for change. And if I am going to provide you with my email address. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box and I'll be happy to look at those and answer those back. And then reach out to me. So I would like to thank Donna for the opportunity to be with you all today. I'm always honored anytime I get to talk to teachers and humbled that I'm ever offered an invitation. So thank you, Donna.
Thank
I hope
you,
that was
Angie.
beneficial in some way.
You are, I just love listening to you, especially when you get wound up. It's like you have so much information to share. And you literally just hit the tip of the iceberg today, because when you start talking about New Madrid, there's no stopping you. So we have a question. Can you talk more about your journey and how you improve success for special education students?
Yes, I would. In my journey as a building principal, we found that the special education teachers had really kind of been left out of some of the instruction and training that our regular ed teachers had been given. That was an error on our part. And another thing was special education. The mindset previously had kind of been, it was like a separate silo. And we found in our journey that when you bring regular ed and special education together, it really can be, you can close such a gap with your tier 1 instruction and getting everyone on the same page. When you improve tier 1 instruction, you improve it for everyone across the board. A student with a learning disability, it's not a special education problem. It's an everyone problem. It's everyone in the building has to come together. So a regular ed teacher they've got to know the goals. They've got to know what is it that we're working on. And then what's my piece? What will I do in my classroom to help close that gap? What will the interventionist do to close that gap? What will our part be? And then we've got to have constant communication in those data meetings. Are they making improvements? Are they growing? And if not, why? And what are we going to do about it? And remember, in the repetitions, we know a disabled learner is going to need 40 to 200 repetitions. So the goals being consistent, that everybody know them, everybody be aware of them, everybody embrace it, that this is my responsibility, not putting that off on someone else. And just quickly, if I've got time to share, when I took over as a building leader, over 26% of the school population was a student with an IEP. We ended up getting that down to 13% and then reducing it to 12%, 11%, and 10%. And we were able to find, I felt like so many of our students, and this, please know, you don't know me well enough to know that I'm not trying to blame or shame. There's no blaming or shaming anybody in this. I think it was really just, we learned as we went. But when we found that prior to some of the information that we gained, and along this journey, before it had really kind of been, special education had kind of been looked at as a life sentence. Once you got an IEP, you kind of had one until you graduated. And we found that students, even with a specific learning disability, once we closed that gap, they could be a proficient reader. They could be proficient and they could reach grade level proficiency. So that's kind of the journey that we've had. And that continued in the district, New Madrid County R1 district, and it continues to this day. Across the board, they were able to greatly reduce the number of students with an IEP.
You know, I think that's what the thinking behind co-teaching is all about, to bring in special ed teachers and regular ed to work together. But I think that's a very superficial way to do it, because you're not really working on what needs to happen. Just because you have a special ed body in there, teacher helping, the regular ed teacher, you're supposed to work as a team, but I don't know if it goes beyond that. I'm not sure. And so I think that was the thinking behind co-teaching, but the reality is it only goes to a certain level. Whereas this, if you're collaborating together on data and approaches and materials, it goes to a whole different level, in my
It
opinion.
does. And in those weekly meetings, we had a student teacher when I was a building principal that was sitting in on those. And she said it, no, we had never thought of it, but she said, I absolutely love it. Like we had just talked about our first grade reading data. And she said, I loved it when the first grade teacher shared, because everybody in the room then became a first grade teacher. And so we carried on that, but then when the special education teachers and when our interventionists and our title people were talking about their data, everybody then became a special education teacher. So everybody has to own that data. Because we can't say, oh, well, that's the special education teacher's responsibility. No, it's all of our responsibility. We all have to own that. And so, what are we all going to do for that student? And I think too, that's why it's so important to drill down student by student. I remember early on in data meetings, just going in and hearing a percentage, like 56% of students are okay right now, on this benchmark. Well, I'm still failing almost half of them. So now what am I going to do? But then drill down, what do I need to do for each specific student? Is this an accuracy issue? So do I need to do a decoding intervention? Is this a fluency problem? Is this a vocabulary weakness? Like, what is it? And then, so exactly what do I need to change about my instruction?
Yeah, good advice. Okay, we had a question about how do you empower speech paths and school psychs to be part of the team?
Okay, so it is my experience and my journey that if you have not included them, there's your gold mine. Because when I was an elementary teacher, I went all the way through college, elementary education, and even getting my master's in administration. I did not know before Dr. Vicki Gibson trained me on the science of reading. I did not know what a phoneme was. I did not know as a fifth grade teacher the importance of breaking apart syllables and teaching syllabication. So the people in the building, the in-house specialists, the gurus, the people who have that deep knowledge base already that did get it in college, they are your SLPs. That's, your speech and language pathologist. I was so blessed as a building principal. I'm going to say her name, Angie Jackson. She's great. One of the best I've ever seen. We have our SLPs in Thorp, Jess Morello, and Elizabeth. They are phenomenal. Jess has done an incredible job here going in, modeling in classrooms. If you're not using them, that is a resource that you can tap into. Same thing about the school psychs. They have a wealth of information. I know the school psych here has been, I would call her a lead pivotal piece in the work that's been done in Thorp. I don't know that we can make it without her. Yeah. Nicole has been a really foundational piece in the work that's been done here.
Well,
and they are included, our SLP and school psych, they're sitting there at every single data meeting. Our school psych here is actually the one that's pulling up the data, helping lead the meetings. They've attended every weekly meeting that we've been having the last few months, and they're giving advice and tips and throwing out, coaching and support as well.
Well, that leads to the next comment from Rebecca. What I see regularly is coaches and teachers trying to move the needle, but administrators not willing to make the shift or not understanding the comprehensiveness that's necessary. What do you recommend to educators who find themselves in this situation?
That's a hard situation to be in. I remember when I was a classroom teacher, I had been receiving the training and my district had allowed Vicki Gibson and Jan Hasbrook to kind of mentor me along the journey, but everyone else wasn't on that journey. So it's a tough spot to be in. Everyone got on that journey after we had the information. Everybody joined on that journey. And it wasn't that I was special or anything, that it's just that I had professional development. So I want to say, as building leaders, we have to be the ones to own this. It is our responsibility to get this information in the hands of our teachers. And if we don't, this is again just me saying this, but I feel that we're failing the teachers. They are counting on us to get that out. And as a district leader, same thing. As a district leader, we need district leaders to be instructional leaders that are driving the instruction for the entire district and owning that data as well. So my advice really to an educator that's in that spot, go in your classroom and be the change agent to your audience, to your classroom, because let me tell you what will happen. This is what happened in my experience. And I know by working with Nora from Ebley, she said so many teachers shared the same experience. Once the teachers saw what was happening with that teacher's students, and they saw the data improving, the question is, oh my gosh, what are you doing in your classroom? The first teacher, if I can briefly share this, the first teacher that came to me and said, we taught side by side, what are you doing in here? Because I'm not getting those results. We're spending the same amount of time. I'm working on weekends, at nights and everything. Like, I'm investing the same amount of time. What is it that you're doing? What is it that you're saying that I'm not saying? That teacher who asked that ended up being on the building leadership team. She took every bit of coaching she got, and she followed me and replaced me as principal. So one teacher, if once you have that knowledge base, go in and implement it, because then you can affect the classroom teachers in your hallway and in your grade level teams. 1 becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes a powerful team within the building. If you are a standalone, reach out to your SLP, reach out to your school psych, reach out to someone else in a neighboring district, but start building your team. But just do the work, because you can be a change agent. You can go in for your students. Students then begin talking about it with other students. And then once that dialogue gets started, it kind of then opens up, and then change can really spread.
That is so true. Lead by example.
Yes, yes.
And it is true. I've seen it happen. So, all right. I think our time is up, and we do have one more question from John Humphreys. Angie, you've seen state level systems change attempted in Missouri, and now there is some work being attempted in Wisconsin. What is your perspective on what's necessary for success?
Well, so, and John knows I am the newbie to Wisconsin. I haven't even lived here a year yet. I'm nearing a year. I started on July 1st. I will talk about, I did see some of the state level systems change in Missouri. And when we started getting traction is when Missouri Department of Elementary and Special Education, that's DESE in Missouri, in Wisconsin, it's DPI, but in Missouri, DESE jumped on board and said, this is something that we're going to take on. And they started pushing out that information to states. I mean, to ours went through like local RPDCs, and then they pushed that out to school districts within the state. There were leadership programs that you could get on in the state that I think helped some people, but we saw it at the top. The leaders at the State Department really looked at, this is something that we want to do. This is something that we want to invest in. And I do feel that that's necessary. I'm not like preaching to the people in Wisconsin, but I do think that we all have to come together and embrace it and say, this is something that needs to be done for our students. And I say that from the perspective of, it's what the students need us to do. They're the ones counting on us, and they're the ones that are depending upon us. I mean, it's not like we're wanting to embrace something that is proven to be ineffective. We're simply wanting to embrace something that is proven with 40+ years of research that it is effective. It's proven to be effective.
Mhm.
So I was going back. Did I answer all of his questions there?
Right, yep, I think
Okay.
so.
It's hard to read and talk and read the question.
All right, Angie, thank you for your time, your expertise, and we're so glad you're here in Wisconsin. We truly are.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And I survived the winter and loved it. So they say I'm good, I guess. if
Give
you
it
can make-
time, give it time. You may not always love it. So if any of the leaders that are here today would want to perhaps be on our lunch and lead events, let me know. I'm always looking for people that are new to the change and are willing to talk about their journey. So give me a call or email. Thanks for showing up today. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Donna, quick question. Is this it for this school year, and will you start again in the fall, or will there be sessions in the summer?
There are no sessions in the summer. However, I'm glad you mentioned that because we have Brent Conway is doing a 3-hour training for only $25. So look on the Science of Reading site, and that's being advertised, and you can register for that.
Okay.
We do have someone scheduled for September, but I'm debating what to do as to whether we want to continue this or maybe move on to something else. Any feedback would be great.
So I just happen to every now and again on the Science of Reading Facebook page, I would see that there's something happening, and usually I was too late and watched the recording.
Mhm.
Is that the best